Welcome, everyone. Hi. Thanks for joining us today for building a world-class contact database with Twilio SendGrid. So who are we and why are we equipped to talk to you about this today? My name is Becca Weiss, and I manage the implementation team at Twilio SendGrid. I've been at Twilio SendGrid for almost 4 years now. I started on our frontline support team, and my team helps new customers get onboarded with Twilio SendGrid, as well as helping existing customers optimize their SendGrid accounts, all based on email best practices. I've onboarded hundreds of customers myself, and I've seen a lot of really great sending practices and also a lot of really bad sending practices.
And I'm Ellie Johnson, the Marketing Operations Manager here at Twilio SendGrid. I've been here for almost 7 years, and during my tenure have done everything from sales to managing our event email strategy. Now I manage marketing operations, which encompasses everything from keeping our own database clean to ensuring we're following privacy best practices. Basically, I'm working in the background to ensure that my teammates can do their best work. So today, we're going to walk you through the customer email journey, starting with the place where you collect leads, moving on to the best way to engage those leads once they're in your database, and finally moving on to a sunset policy and learning how to say goodbye to them in the end. At each part of the journey, we'll share email best practices. We'll talk about some of the faux pas and worst practices that you should avoid at all costs. And then finally, we'll jump into the SendGrid UI a little bit to show you how SendGrid customers can take action. If, for whatever reason, you don't want to take notes or you want to follow along on your computer, we've uploaded our slides to Bitly. We'll give you a second just in case you want to go there. And before,
Go back.
you want to go back?
Sorry. I tried to make it easy to read, you know.
Contact DB TSG, which stands for Twilio SendGrid. So, before we get started on the journey, we want to take a couple of minutes just to tell you why this is actually an important topic. Does anyone in the audience, not my coworkers, know why we have 85% up on the screen? Well, it's actually the percentage of non-spam commercial email that actually makes it to the inbox. So we're not talking about the spam folder versus the actual inbox placement here. The ISPs like Gmail and Yahoo and MSN actually just drop 15% of all legitimate email into the ether. It doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't go to spam, it's just not there anymore. And a contact database that doesn't follow best practices runs the very real risk of falling into that sad 15%. Because your database is, well, the base of your entire email program. And if it's on shaky ground, you will definitely run into deliverability trouble, which leads us to our next slide. What is deliverability?
The short version is that deliverability is the success or lack of success of your emails actually landing in your recipients' inboxes. Deliverability is determined by the inbox providers like Gmail, Yahoo, Microsoft, and it's a direct reflection of a few things. That first major thing is email authentication, so things like DKIM, SPF, DMARC. These authenticate your mail and tell the recipient and the inbox provider that you are who you say you are. If you want more information on these things, my colleague Justin and Jacob, they're in the back there, are doing a presentation, same time, same place tomorrow. The next major thing that deliverability is a reflection of is your engagement. These are things like opens and clicks. Are your recipients engaging with your email? Are they marking your email as spam? And how your recipients are engaging is a direct reflection on your database practices. Now, there's a lot of other things that go into deliverability, but these are the two major ones. It's a really complicated subject, but if you follow the best practices around your contact database that we're going to share with you today, you'll be on a great right start. And ultimately, all of these things add up to what we call a reputation. And the inbox providers are giving your mail a reputation based off that engagement, based off your authentication. And that's what's telling them whether or not to put your mail in the inbox, in the spam folder, or end up with that forgotten 15%. So let's start at the beginning of the journey. And where better to start than how you're collecting your leads? The main thing to remember here is that not all lead sources are created equal. But where do you want to put your time when you're gathering your recipients? When it comes to growing your email list, there's one place you're sure to find the most engaged recipients possible. It might not be a really quick process, but we promise it's going to be worth it in the long run.
That place is organic growth. At SendGrid, when we're focusing on organic growth, we think about our newsletter and our blog sign-up forms on our site specifically, because those are places where our customers and our leads are seeking us out very specifically and giving us their contact information because they want to hear more from us about our product, about our expertise, and it means that they really want to hear from us. Often, organic growth is a slower process than something like paid social, but we promise that those leads will be worth it, and in the long run, they'll continue engaging and wanting to hear from you. And we know that the paid social, like Facebook and LinkedIn ads, are great ways to increase your brand awareness, but they don't necessarily create as engaged leads in the long run. But there are a couple of things that you can do to mitigate those risks if you still want to continue using paid social, and Becca's going to talk about that next.
Yeah, so these are the most common mistakes you can make at signup. The first one is collecting manual signup. So I know it's really easy to get handwritten addresses, at a storefront or at a conference, but they can perform worse because, one, you're going to make a typo when you enter it into your system, and not everyone can read everybody else's handwriting. I know I can't read my own handwriting half the time. The second one is going to be not confirming your social signups. Like Ellie said, Facebook and LinkedIn are great ways to get your brand out there. But with Facebook signups, a lot of times we're seeing that these addresses can be really old and that your recipients might not have updated that address, and therefore that address is going to bounce the first time you send to them. So what we recommend doing here is adding an additional confirmation piece. I worked with a customer pretty recently that heavily relied on Facebook signups because their app was very integrated into the Facebook platform, and we were seeing their mail land in the spam folder due to a lot of these bounces. So what we ended up doing was creating an in-app notification that said, hey, is this really your email address? If so, check yes. If not, put in your real email address here. And that way they were able to increase their inboxing rate. And then the last one is long sign-up forms. So I know it's really easy at sign-up to collect a lot of information about your user. In the last session, you heard about segmentation. It is really important, but know that you can deter your customers from signing up altogether if that form is too long. This is a really great place to implement an A/B test. Maybe, putting that first name, last name, email address in one attribute or adding a few attributes here. So now we're going to take a look into the SendGrid Marketing Campaigns UI and see how you can create your own organic sign-up form. This is a screenshot directly from the UI, and it allows you to build that sign-up form in a really easy way, adding unique styles and fields that you want to collect. Any sign-ups will go directly into the marketing campaigns list of your choosing. We have CAPTCHA built right into the form, so you don't have to worry about doing that piece on your end. And we do have a lot of customers ask us, can we remove that CAPTCHA? We don't want that there. But we keep it there, and we do it to protect you. And Ellie's going to tell you about why SendGrid implemented a CAPTCHA on our page.
So before SendGrid used CAPTCHA, there had been trouble, I think, for a lot of people with bots bombing sign-up forms on our websites. And we unfortunately had the same thing happen where we had hundreds of thousands of bots fill out our blog subscription form that I then later got to comb through and remove from our database. It was an enormous pain and something that absolutely could have been avoided if we would have been following best practices earlier.
So once your form's designed, you can either directly embed that sign-up form via an iframe into your website, or you can use a landing page that SendGrid hosts with that form. It's super easy to use and to deploy.
Whether you're building out a brand new contact center list or you're cleaning up your existing list, there are a few major faux pas that you should be avoiding at all costs. Today, we'll call them, for fun, your contact center villains.
So the first of the villains is Darth Vader, or renting and purchasing lists. This is the biggest mistake that we see email marketers make.
The big daddy of them all, you might say.
And if you're purchasing a list, you're going to be sending to users that have likely never heard of your brand before. They have no idea why you're emailing them, and it's the easiest way to hurt your reputation because most of these users will probably mark your email as spam. Not to mention, they're typically filled with spam trap addresses, which are addresses that are put onto purchased lists in order to suss out people who purchase them. And then your IPs can end up blacklisted. Not to mention as well that any major ESP is not going to allow you onto their platform if you're purchasing these lists.
The second sly villain in our contact center villains is sending without consent. Just because you have an email address in your database, it definitely does not mean that you should or can send to them. This is really broken up into two main categories. The first is the list of addresses that you might have gotten through legitimate means that you don't necessarily have permission to send to. So a great example of this is your new account signups, that unless you've started your email relationship off on the right foot by letting them know that you'll be sending marketing email to them, letting them know what you might be sending and how often they might learn to hear from you, you can probably send them transactional email, password resets, your account confirmation, but you probably shouldn't add them to your monthly blog digest. The second category here is unsubscribes. You need to honor them no matter what. If somebody has let you know that they don't want to hear from you anymore, you really can't run the risk of getting hit by a bus like Regina George, and you just need to stop sending them to them altogether.
So the last of our villains is ignoring privacy. So let's talk about the white elephant or white walker in the room, GDPR. Who in the room was given a really hard time when GDPR came out last year? I know I had a hard time with it with my customers. So we're going to leave the specifics to you and your lawyer's best discretion, but always keep data privacy in mind when you're compiling a database. Make sure that your senders know where and when your recipients are giving permission to message them. Send only what you have permission to, like Ellie mentioned before. And then a really good best practice is to follow the strictest law of the country that you're emailing to. For example, Germany, we know, has really strict email laws, and if you're emailing Europe, kind of best case scenario is to use those laws in Germany to email the rest of your database as well to make sure you're staying in compliance.
Moving along your customer email journey, now that you've got someone's contact email in your database, you have permission to send to them, you should be thinking about how then you should engage with them. So chances are, if you have heard from SendGrid marketing before, you've heard this mantra: send the right message to the right person at the right time and with the right frequency. In other words, you should learn about your customers before you send them any email to ensure that you're sending email that is in some way tailored to their needs as your customer or lead. Even if this means sending to a much smaller list than you would prefer, we promise that it's going to be worth it in the end because you'll avoid spam reports and unsubscribes. So that mantra kind of just boils down into sending email that people love. The email that you're sending should always offer your leads and customers something and should generally come from an unselfish place. I think that this email from Squarespace is actually a really awesome example because they aren't just sending a coupon, they're not just letting their customers know about a new sale. They're giving their customers helpful information about something that's going on in their account, and they're also offering these 20 new templates. It's making their customers' lives easier, and while it's probably focused on getting signups or upgrades to pay plan, it feels good to get an email that's also, as a customer, making my life easier.
So the next one we'll talk about is using profile information to target recipients with email that's relevant from them. This is an example of an email that I received from Chewy not too long ago. We recently got a new puppy, and so I signed up for their emails hoping to get some more products, and immediately they started targeting me with emails about products for dogs, which I love because I don't care about cat products, I don't care about other pet products. This is really targeted to my use case for Chewy. Another piece of information that you might have about your recipient and can use is their location. Think about segmenting your list by location and sending your emails to those people when they might be at their computer. And the last thing here is that sending at the right time doesn't always mean sending when your recipients are awake. It also means that you're not oversending to your recipients. Think about implementing a frequency policy. So for instance, let's say you send a monthly and a daily newsletter, and I really love your monthly newsletter, but I don't really love your daily newsletter.
So now that we've showed you a couple of great examples, I'm actually going to show you an example of something that you should never do. This is an email that I received last year from a company in the Bay Area that we will not name, in which they admitted to buying my list and then adding me to a list in which they blasted one email to many people. It falls into all of the contacts that are villain traps. They've purchased my list, they've sent to me without consent, and they also have my PII, my personally identifiable information, in their database without me having given it to them. It felt really bad to me to get this email in my inbox, and it certainly doesn't fall within the email that people love category because I didn't ask for it, I didn't want it, it just showed up out of the blue, and it kind of soured my idea of that company's product and what they were offering me. But now that you've seen something negative, Becca's actually going to jump back into the SendGrid UI to show you how you can send something incredible, a welcome email series in SendGrid's new automation product.
Yeah. So now you're looking at another screenshot directly from the SendGrid UI, and this is our automation workflow. So you can either choose the SendGrid pre-built welcome series workflow, or you can create a workflow of your own. And when you go to create the campaign, you'll be brought to this page to do so. Once you've selected that automation, you can decide the criteria for when you want to add them to these series. So for instance, for this welcome series, I want to make sure that any contact that gets added to my database is getting this series right from the bat. So I've chosen to add it when they get added to my contacts list. The next thing you can do is choose an exit criteria. So you can either choose to remove them if they don't meet that list criteria anymore, or you can choose to remove them after they've received the entire welcome series, which is what I've done here. And the last thing here is you'll make sure you choose an unsubscribe group for your automation. It's really, really important that you're giving your recipients that option to unsubscribe because, again, it's much better than getting that spam report button hit. And last but not least, you can add categories, which are high-level tagging system. So when you go into the UI to look at your statistics, you can get really detailed and granular with that data. Then once all your settings are in place, you can edit the content of the campaign, change the frequency in which these are sending, and add or remove emails in your series. So now that you're sending to your recipients, Ellie's going to talk about some engagement metrics that you should be watching out for.
So once you're sending email to your customers, the most important stats to take a look at are opens and then click-through rate, which is the number of total clicks divided by the number of total opens. It's a great way to tell if your users are actually engaging with your email, and this is actually the helpful place in calculating ROI from your email too, seeing who is actually opening the email, who's clicking into it and going into your product. The other subset of stats that you should be watching at all times are a little bit less positive. Those are unsubscribes, bounces, spam reports, and invalid emails that you're sending to, because these are the things that, if they get a little out of control, can very quickly affect your email reputation and your deliverability quickly. Another thing to note that I think this slide does a great job of explaining is that you should be watching your stats over time. These are actually stats that our data science team pulled over the last 3 years. They looked at hundreds of billions of emails that SendGrid customers sent. And what they show is that over the last 3 years, SendGrid customers were sending fewer emails every month and actually seeing higher overall engagement. So it's a great reminder that looking at your email stats over time, looking at engagement over time, looking at unsubscribes over time, will give you a holistic view of your overall email health. It will help you make decisions moving forward, like possibly sending fewer emails to your customers.
So when it's time to start tracking your metrics within the SendGrid UI, you can do it at a high level like you see here. This is our global stats page. You're able to see those statistics in detail day by day. And what I look for here a lot of the time is looking at those unique opens day over day. Did one day my unique open rate skyrocket? One day did it go really low? And repeating what I did when it skyrocketed and not repeating what I did when it went really low. We also have really detailed statistics, so you can dig into things like domain and devices. And with these device statistics, for example, you can really gear your content, making sure that it's exactly what your recipient wants. So if I know that my recipients are always opening their emails in the Chrome web browser, for instance, I'll make sure that my content looks good in that browser.
All good things obviously must come to an end, and in any email program, it's actually normal that some recipients stop engaging over time. After all, the average person actually receives 500 emails every month from marketing teams across the country and the world, really. Email fatigue is real. And instead of letting unengaged recipients continue to languish in your database, it's actually important to retire them for a few reasons. The first is your customer experience and brand goodwill. I know that when I continue receiving email from a brand that I don't really want to hear from anymore, I start to have some negative thoughts about them. So it's important to nip that in the bud really quickly and just stop sending to people who maybe don't want to hear from you but haven't explicitly told you so yet. The second is deliverability. Like Becca said earlier, low engagement also affects inbox placement, as do things like spam reports and sending to invalid email addresses. And finally, the cost to house unengaged and thus kind of worthless email data and addresses is actually a burden that your email program doesn't have to bear.
So who can and should you removing from your database? Before we get into that, I just want to survey the room. Who is afraid to remove people from their database and or knows that their boss would get mad at them if they removed anyone from their database? We have no email.
We had one in the back
room. What if I told you that removing recipients would actually help increase your inboxing rate, therefore increasing your site traffic or your ROI? It can. And I know it's crazy that, I work for Twilio SendGrid, we make money off of you sending emails, and we're telling you to remove emails and stop sending as frequently, but it's really true. So right off the bat, there's some really obvious ones that you should be removing your list. These are your invalids, your bounced addresses, your spam reports, your unsubscribes. These should immediately be removed from your list. And reason being is that, like Ellie said previously, these can negatively impact the reputation of your email and put your mail in the spam folder. The next one takes a little bit more strategic looking into and deciding what's right for your business, but these are your unengaged users. And we mentioned a sunset policy, and what that means is you're deciding after your recipient hasn't engaged with you in so many months, you're going to remove them from your list. So we've actually heard from certain inbox providers that sending to someone who hasn't engaged with your email in 6 months is the kiss of death, so that's a great place to start. But know that this is going to be different for every business, and some businesses have to scale back on that, and some can make it a little bit more loose. So Ellie's going to talk to you about why a re-engagement campaign here can be a really great option for you.
So if the thought of deleting hundreds or even thousands of email addresses out of your database makes your stomach churn a little bit, I think that considering a re-engagement campaign before you delete people at the end is actually a really appropriate thing to try. Generally, a re-engagement campaign is one email in which you give your customers and leads, anyone who's in your database who hasn't engaged in 6 months or maybe more, one last chance to re-opt into your email and tell you, actually, I do want to hear from you, like continue sending me email. I think this example is actually really phenomenal because they reset expectations about what their email program sends and how often they send. They also give the opportunity to resubscribe. They give clear expectations of options moving forward. And they also offer a less frequent cadence for recipients who are maybe feeling just a little bit fatigued. That's my favorite part about this email. At SendGrid, we do something similar, but instead of giving a less frequent cadence, we actually offer recipients a 90-day break. If they're feeling fatigued, they can just take 3 months off from our email and then automatically be re-opted in. And it's actually reduced our overall unsubscribe rate by almost 20%. It's been really successful for us. At SendGrid, we've also tried re-engagement campaigns in the past, and while we certainly have never saved an entire list, and overall engagement has been a little bit lower than what we're used to, we have managed to get people interested in our email program again and engaging once more. So I would say if you've got the bandwidth to try, this is an absolutely great thing to test out for your program. So to wrap things up, we've distilled everything that we just talked about into the 4 keys of keeping a great contact database for you here. The first is to grow your list organically and focus on places where people are asking for your expertise and your assistance and wanting more email from you. The second is following the SendGrid mantra, send the right email to the right recipient at the right time and with the right frequency. Use what you know about your recipients to get the most from your email program. Third, avoid those pesky villains. We don't want Darth Vader, Regina George, or the Night King in your email program. Don't make those mistakes and ruin your reputation. And finally, know when to say goodbye and start utilizing a sunset policy.
So with that, our journey comes to an end. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a few minutes left, it looks like, so we'd love to answer any questions if anyone has any. Yes, I will. Oh, too far. There we go.
One of the analytics you mentioned was looking at emails that bounce and also spam reports. How do you know whether a user in your list has reported your email as spam to Google? How can you remove it?
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit more. So when a user marks your email as spam, from the inbox provider, we get what's called a feedback loop. And Google is actually one of the inbox providers that does not provide a feedback loop to anyone for those spam reports. We do get them from Yahoo and some of the other providers, and that gets reported back to SendGrid, and SendGrid will drop those email addresses automatically. For Google, however, because they're not providing that feedback loop, we recommend using what's called Google Postmaster tools, and that will give you an idea of what your reputation is through Google, and you can kind of look at sunsetting policies and things like that from there. Looks like we've got a question with the mic.
Hi, great session. How do you treat customers that have a significant amount of opens and clicks, but when you call them on the phone, they don't respond?
You call them and they don't respond?
They're just not, they engage, they look at your email and they may forward it on, but they're not like...
It sounds like your customers just want more email from you.
Yes.
Right.
It sounds like you should look at your frequency policy and try emailing them, and it might be like, I mean, I'll give myself as an example. I don't really love talking on the phone, and so I might want somebody to reach out to me via email on that one-to-one level rather than just talking over the phone. It's just a little bit easier. It doesn't take as much time. I can do it on my cadence.
And last year we did a study where we surveyed millennials and Gen Z, so the generation younger than ourselves, and actually found out that both millennials and Gen Z want to hear from brands over email, over any other means of communication. So it could just be, like Becca said, that people want to hear one-to-one basis from email, and the phone just isn't their top choice.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I guess I'm wondering, statistically, is there a difference between B2C emails and B2B emails?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So B2B is a lot harder to get into. B2B tend to have spam filters set up that are just a lot stricter because they're trying to protect their employees. I don't, off the top of my head, have any statistics. If you want, I can throw my email back up here, and please feel free to email me later. We can grab contact information after. But B2B is a lot harder to get into, and we know that B2C, like Gmail and Yahoo, are getting really smart and sophisticated with their filtering, but they're still letting a lot more in than those B2B filters are.
No? There we go.
There you go.
Do you do any tracking on how many people are replying to email campaigns? Like, does anyone actually ever reply to their campaigns, and is there ever automation set up for that, or kind of similar to SMS?
We don't track replies, but there is, you can use click-through rates and things like that to understand that. Replies itself, we have a tool called Inbound Parse where you could actually set up your inbound email system through us, and then we would be able to track that. But SendGrid on its own isn't going to track responses. Yeah.
What's the standard unsubscribe rate? I saw the other stats. Do you guys have a history?
So ours is generally hanging out at like 0.4%. And it really, so before we instituted the 90-day pause option, plus more customizable email preferences, it was closer to 0.6%. And so testing additional preferences where people can kind of customize what they want to hear from you and take a little break has been great for us. But I think it totally depends on your own program and the industry that you're sending from.
Yeah, and like if I can give any advice, it's to make your unsubscribe obvious. Like you probably have seen in Gmail, they have the list unsubscribe header now, where right at the top of the email, they give you the option to unsubscribe. And that is 1,000,000 times better than clicking that spam report button. So let your users unsubscribe if they don't want to hear from you anymore. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there any best practices you can share for dealing with burner email accounts that people sign up, but they're not really using their good email address to burner?
Yeah, so that's again for the sunsetting frequency, that's the best way to catch them. honestly, like if you're sending a welcome series and that recipient doesn't open any of your emails in your welcome series, I would remove them from the list immediately, especially if you're seeing a lot of emails landing in the spam folder.
But we also hear more and more about people having maybe 3 email accounts, and they all kind of do different things for them. I know personally I have my work account, I have my personal account that I'm actually checking all the time, and then I have maybe my burner account where it's what I'm using when I'm signing up for email newsletters or I'm buying things. But I actually engage with that a lot. And actually I think that we've seen positive stats in studies where if people are actually using that kind of account and they go to that account, they're actually going to check the emails looking for things like sales and coupons more often because it's less buried in the stuff that they're looking at all the time.
Yeah.
So if they're going once or twice a week, they're actually combing through and seeing what they want. So I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing for people to use burner accounts.
Yeah, yeah. All right, it looks like we are out of time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We'll be here the next couple of days, so please feel free to find us and ask questions.